Jax's revenge domain. I knew something was wrong when Jerry from HR knocked on my office door and said, "Hey Rod, you forgot to sign the new safety protocol." I never forget paperwork. That's why Apex Manufacturing's production lines had run at 99.7% uptime since I rebuilt the control systems from scratch instead of breaking down every other Tuesday like they did before I got my hands on them. My name's Rodney Castellano. I'm 48 years old, and I've been keeping this place running for 22 years. Still, I signed the paper, handed it back, and went right back to monitoring the SCADA network for the $85 million Titan Industries acquisition. The deal they kept announcing at every company meeting like it was Christmas morning, but nobody actually understood how the systems would integrate. They just knew it meant bigger bonuses for management and probably pink slips for half the floor workers. 22 years. That's how long I'd been at Apex Manufacturing, not in the spotlight, not getting credit in the quarterly reports. I was the guy who crawled under conveyor belts at 2 a.m. when sensor arrays failed, who rebuilt PLC logic when production lines seized up, who kept ancient systems talking to modern equipment with custom interface modules I welded together in my garage workshop on weekends. You know, the boring stuff, the critical stuff, the stuff they don't notice until it breaks and costs them $50,000 an hour in downtime. That morning, I had 3 monitors showing system diagnostics, a half-empty coffee mug going cold, and a maintenance log that said, "Check backup power coupling," Bay 7 circled in red ink. Behind me, the plant floor hummed with the usual industrial symphony. Stamping presses hitting their rhythm at 180 cycles per minute, conveyor motors maintaining their programmed speeds, air compressors cycling on schedule every 12 minutes. And buried in all that mechanical noise was the steady electronic heartbeat of the control systems I'd spent 2 decades fine-tuning. In the middle of monitoring everything, I sat alone in my corner reviewing the integration protocols for Titan's legacy equipment. My clearance authorization sat right there in the federal documentation. Senior Systems Liaison, Neutral Witness, Integration Specialist. I was the bridge between our modern control network and Titan's 1990s-era production systems that still ran on DOS-based controllers. No one else in the company had that certification. The training alone took 18 months and cost the company $40,000. You had to understand both the old stuff and the new stuff, plus federal safety regulations that most people couldn't even pronounce correctly. They gave me the responsibility, then forgot I had it. I didn't mind being invisible. There's peace in it. You get to build things properly while the suit and tie crowd argues about synergies and market penetration in conference rooms with catered lunch. I wasn't looking for corner offices or executive parking spots. I just wanted my systems clean, my documentation accurate, and my coffee uninterrupted so I could do the job right. The only people who really knew what I did were the ones smart enough to understand how fragile the whole operation was. Gary Stone at Titan Industries, who'd been running manufacturing systems since before Windows existed. My old supervisor, Pete, before he retired to his fishing boat in Florida. The insurance inspector who certified our safety systems and always asked to see my maintenance logs first. Everyone else saw me as just Rod from maintenance. Middle-aged, quiet, grease under his fingernails, overworked, underappreciated. The guy who fixed things when they broke but didn't contribute to the big picture. Then Bryce Hamilton showed up to fix everything that wasn't broken. That Wednesday started like any other until the email hit at 9:15 a.m. All hands mandatory meeting 10 sharp. Strategic restructuring plus organizational updates. Don't miss it. That's corporate speak for heads are rolling. And someone new is swinging the axe. Enter Bryce Hamilton, new Chief Operations Officer. Mid-30s Harvard MBA, wearing a suit that cost more than my truck payment. He had that consulting firm energy you see in business magazines. The kind of guy who thinks efficiency is a personality trait and calls spreadsheets optimization tools with a straight face. He smiled too much, talked too fast, called himself a transformation specialist. I knew we were all broken parts in his optimization equation from minute 1. He spoke for 45 minutes straight, dropping buzzwords like digital transformation, legacy system optimization, and operational redundancy elimination. People around me nodded like he was revealing the secrets of the universe. I just sipped my burnt coffee and watched a temperature spike on line 3 that would cause an automatic shutdown if someone didn't adjust the cooling system parameters in the next hour. Nobody else was monitoring it. They were too busy being inspired by synergy. I reached over and made the adjustment remotely, saving them about $30,000 in lost production time. Bryce kept talking about eliminating redundant human capital and streamlining legacy workflows. I wondered if he'd consider a production line shutdown redundant or streamlined. 3 hours later, Jerry knocked again. This time he brought backup. 2 people from HR I'd never seen before, one with a clipboard, one with dead eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses that probably cost more than I made in a week. "Rod, can we talk privately?" Translation: "Bend over and grab your ankles." They led me into a conference room like I was carrying something contagious. No water offered, no small talk, no "how's the family?" Just a manila folder slid across the fake wood table like a death warrant with my name on it. Bryce didn't bother showing up for the execution. The letter inside was half buzzwords, half legal protection. Position no longer aligns with strategic vision. Operational restructuring requires different skill sets. Digital transformation initiatives, effective immediately. I was still reading the corporate doublespeak when clipboard lady said, "You'll need to return your badge and access cards before 3 p.m. today." The other one added, "Security's been notified of your departure." I stood up, walked toward the door, then stopped. Something caught my eye through the conference room window. At the reception desk where they kept lost keys and dying office plants, someone had taped a printed photo of my face. In red marker scrawled across the bottom, "No re-entry, security risk, not former employee, not Rod, not even terminated staff. Just a security risk stuck to fake wood laminate like I was some kind of industrial terrorist." It hit me like a wrench to the chest. I'd trained their last 2 facility managers when they got promoted. I'd kept their biggest production contract alive through 3 major equipment failures and that power outage in 2019 that knocked out half of Cleveland. I'd missed my daughter Sarah's high school graduation to babysit a server migration that saved them $200,000 in downtime penalties and customer complaints, and now I was being treated like a criminal in work boots. I didn't argue. That would have been giving them entertainment they didn't deserve. I took a breath, walked back to my workstation, and started packing my tools into the metal toolbox I'd carried for 15 years. My adjustable wrench, the one Linda bought me for our anniversary. Digital multimeter that could diagnose problems other people couldn't even identify. Cable crimpers, custom diagnostic tablets I'd programmed myself. Everything that made me more than just another maintenance guy. The floor had gone quiet. Not machine quiet, the equipment kept running, but people quiet. Word travels fast in a manufacturing plant. Everyone knew what that manila folder meant, and they were all wondering who was next on Bryce's optimization list. My assistant Corey walked over, pretending to check a work order. Kid was 24, fresh out of technical school, eager to learn everything I could teach him about keeping industrial systems alive. "This is crazy," he whispered. "You're the only one who understands half this stuff." I nodded toward the SCADA monitors. "Temperatures climbing on line 3 again. Cooling system's going to trip the thermal protection in about 20 minutes. You'll need to reset the PLC parameters." "I don't know how to do that." "Now you'll learn." Corey looked like someone had just told him he'd have to perform surgery with a screwdriver. "Rod, what if I can't figure it out?" I closed my toolbox and picked it up. 40 pounds of equipment that had solved 1,000 problems over the years. Then the line shuts down, production stops, and somebody upstairs learns what I actually do around here. I walked toward the exit, past workstations where people avoided eye contact like unemployment was contagious. Past the break room where I'd eaten lunch alone most days for 22 years. Past the maintenance office where I'd documented every repair, every upgrade, every late-night emergency call that kept this place profitable. Jerry was waiting by the security door with his hand out. "Badge and access cards, Rod." I handed them over. No speech, no threats, no, "You'll regret this." Just the quiet click of plastic hitting metal, like dropping coins in a parking meter that's about to expire. "Sorry about this," Jerry mumbled. He'd been doing HR for 8 years, long enough to know when management was making a mistake they'd pay for later. "Not your call," I said, and walked through the door I'd been using since Bill Clinton was president. Outside in the parking lot, I sat in my truck and pulled out my phone. The secure maintenance app was still active. They'd forgotten to disable my remote access. I scrolled to the power management system and found what I was looking for. Bay 7 backup power coupling, the redundant system that kept production running when the main power grid hiccuped during summer heat waves. It was a complex piece of equipment, not just a switch, but a network of sensors, relays, and automated controls that had to sequence perfectly to prevent voltage spikes from damaging sensitive equipment. I designed the coupling system myself after the 2018 blackout that shut down the plant for 3 days. Took me 6 months to engineer, another 3 months to install, and 2 years to fine-tune the response algorithms. The system was so sophisticated that it required manual authentication codes to prevent unauthorized changes, codes that only I knew. I disabled the coupling with a few keystrokes, not damaged, not broken, just offline. The system would show green lights and normal status to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at. But when the next power fluctuation hit the grid, the backup wouldn't engage. 6 production lines would shut down simultaneously, and the restart sequence would take a minimum of 4 hours. With Titan Industries' quality inspection team scheduled to tour the facility tomorrow morning, any production delays would trigger the breach of contract clauses that could kill the acquisition. I didn't smile. I didn't feel vindicated. I just started the truck and drove home with steady hands and clear eyes because they thought they were streamlining operations, but they'd just fired the guy who understood how everything connected. The house felt strange when I got home at 2:30 in the afternoon. Linda wouldn't be back from her nursing shift until 6, and Sarah was away at Ohio State, probably in some lecture hall learning things that would help her avoid the kind of career that ends with a manila folder and a security photo. No equipment alerts pinging my phone. No emergency calls from supervisors who'd found something broken that needed immediate attention. No "Hey Rod, quick question," followed by 3 hours of unpaid troubleshooting. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the kitchen clock marking time I wasn't getting paid for anymore. My toolbox sat on the dining table like a closed casket. Everything I'd accumulated over 2 decades of solving other people's problems. Company property, technically, except for the personal tools I'd bought with my own money to do jobs the company equipment couldn't handle. I walked to the basement workshop, past the holiday decorations Linda hadn't put away yet, behind the water heater that I'd installed myself when the old one died 3 winters ago. In the corner was a filing cabinet I'd bought at a government surplus auction when we first bought the house. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a folder labeled Apex Systems Documentation, Personal Backup. I'd started keeping these records 10 years ago, not because I was paranoid, but because I'd watched too many companies lose critical knowledge when experienced people left or retired. The folder was thick, hand-drawn wiring, diagrams, control logic flowcharts with my annotations in the margins, custom interface specifications for equipment that wasn't supposed to talk to each other, but somehow did, thanks to interface modules I'd built in this very workshop. Integration protocols for every piece of equipment on that factory floor documented in my neat engineer's handwriting because I knew someday the institutional knowledge would walk out the door. I just didn't think it would be me getting pushed out. I flipped to the section marked Power Management, Critical Backup Systems. There it was. Bay 7 power coupling, complete schematics, manual override procedures, restoration protocols, diagnostic troubleshooting steps that would take someone else weeks to figure out through trial and error. The coupling wasn't just a backup system. It was the linchpin that kept production stable during the voltage fluctuations that hit our section of the Cleveland grid every summer when air conditioners overloaded the local transformer. Without it, any power hiccup would cascade through the control network like dominoes falling, shutting down 6 production lines simultaneously. The restart sequence alone would take 4 hours minimum, assuming someone knew the correct power-up sequence to prevent damage to the servo drives. With Titan's quality assurance team doing their final inspection tomorrow morning, any production delays would void the delivery schedule built into the acquisition contract. I sat down slowly in my workshop chair, the maintenance documentation heavy in my hands. Pages and pages of technical details that represented years of learning how industrial systems actually worked, not how they were supposed to work according to the manuals. I hadn't told anyone about the coupling's critical nature because nobody had ever asked. They just handed me problems and expected solutions, without understanding the complexity of keeping 30-year-old equipment running alongside modern computerized systems. They saw me adjust a few settings on a computer screen and assumed it was simple. They didn't see the months of research, the late nights studying electrical diagrams, the weekends spent in salvage yards looking for obsolete parts that weren't manufactured anymore. Well, not anymore. I wasn't angry. That part of me had gone cold in the HR conference room when I saw my photo taped up like a wanted poster. This wasn't emotion. This was mechanical cause and effect. as predictable as a relay opening when current exceeded rated capacity. They hadn't just fired me. They'd removed the person who understood how everything connected, and they had no idea what was coming next. Somewhere across town, Bryce was probably in his office right now, updating spreadsheets and calculating the salary savings from eliminating legacy personnel, maybe planning the celebration dinner for closing the Titan deal. I pulled out my personal laptop from the workshop bench and opened the diagnostic logs I kept as backup documentation. System performance records going back 8 years, maintenance schedules, critical component registries, failure analysis reports, everything they'd need to maintain the systems I'd built and rebuilt and fine-tuned over 2 decades, everything they'd never thought to ask for before they showed me the door. I checked the power management logs one more time. Bay 7 coupling showed offline status, timestamp 2:47 p.m., manual intervention required for restoration, authentication codes needed. They had no idea yet, but tomorrow morning when Titan's executives walked through that plant expecting to see smooth, reliable operations, they'd learn what happened when you fired the guy who kept the lights on. I closed the laptop and adjusted my wrench in my pocket, a habit I'd developed over the years whenever I was thinking through a complex problem. Tomorrow, when their production lines went dark and silent, the screaming would start. The first call came at 6:43 a.m. Thursday morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee, watching the sunrise through the window, when my phone started buzzing on the counter. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then again at 6:45. This time I recognized Bryce Hamilton's direct line from the caller ID. I watched it ring 4 times and go to voicemail. His voice sounded tight, like someone trying to stay calm while his house burned down. Rod, we're experiencing some technical difficulties this morning, and I was hoping you could provide guidance on system restoration procedures. Nothing major, just need to clarify a few operational details. Please call me back as soon as possible. I played it twice, then deleted it. Technical difficulties. That's what they called it when their entire stamping operation shut down at 5:30 a.m. during the power grid fluctuation that hit every summer morning when the city's electrical demand spiked. By 7 a.m., 3 more voicemails had stacked up, the facility manager sounding panicked, the production supervisor trying to stay professional while clearly out of his depth. Even Gary Stone from Titan Industries wondering why his scheduled quality inspection had been postponed indefinitely. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table, listening to the messages pile up like evidence in a case I'd already won. Somewhere across town, maintenance crews were probably crawling through electrical panels right now, trying to figure out why their backup systems weren't responding, looking for the magic switch that would bring 6 production lines back online before Titan's executives decided this wasn't the reliable operation they wanted to acquire for $85 million. Linda came downstairs at 7:30, already dressed for her early shift at Cleveland General. "Rough morning?" she asked, glancing at my phone buzzing with another incoming call. Could say that. They're discovering what I actually did for a living. She'd been married to an engineer long enough to understand the unspoken rules of industrial systems. Sometimes equipment failed. Sometimes the failure happened at exactly the wrong moment. And sometimes the only person who could fix it was the person you'd just treated like yesterday's newspaper. Corey sent me a text at 8:15. "Everything's broken. They're freaking out. Bryce keeps asking where you documented the backup procedures. Nobody knows how to fix anything. Can you help?" I didn't respond immediately. Let them understand what 22 years of experience actually looked like when it walked out the door. At 9 a.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Corey calling directly. "Rod, please. They're offering triple overtime if you'll come in and help restore the systems. The Titan deal is falling apart. Bryce is in full panic mode. Jerry's saying maybe your termination was premature." I turned the phone face down on the table and went back to my coffee. By noon, Linda came home from her shift at the hospital. She found me in the garage, organizing my personal tool collection and separating it from anything that belonged to Apex. "Productive morning?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Could say that. Got fired yesterday. Decided to do some cleaning today." She'd been married to an engineer long enough to understand cause and effect, and their systems just happened to break down the day after they let you go. I looked up from sorting socket wrenches by size. Funny how equipment fails when you don't maintain it properly. Linda nodded. She'd heard me take enough emergency calls over the years to know that industrial systems were more fragile than most people realized. So what happens now? I held up a business license application I'd printed that morning. Rod Castellano Industrial Systems Consulting, specializing in legacy equipment integration and critical system recovery. And your first potential client might be Apex Manufacturing. Depends on whether they're willing to pay market rates for expertise they used to get at salary prices. The official offer came through Jerry at 4 p.m. Emergency consulting contract. Immediate system restoration required. Name your price. I let it sit in my inbox for an hour. Dean Foster, their corporate lawyer, called at 5:30. Professional, apologetic, carefully avoiding any admission of liability for yesterday's termination. Rod, we understand there may have been some miscommunication regarding your departure from Apex. We'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement to address our current technical challenges. I let him talk for 5 minutes about mutual cooperation and professional relationships and shared interests in resolving the situation. Here's how this works, Dean, I finally said. Rod Castellano Industrial Systems charges $300 an hour for standard consulting, $500 an hour for emergency response, $750 an hour for crisis intervention, payment in advance, minimum 8-hour billing increments, silence on the line. And Dean, I don't work for Apex Manufacturing anymore. I work for whoever pays my consulting rates and treats my expertise with professional respect. If that's you, we can do business. If not, good luck finding someone else who understands systems I designed and built from scratch over the past 15 years. More silence. I'll need to discuss this with management, he finally said. You do that. My rates go up 10% every day you wait. By Friday morning, they'd wired my retainer and I was back in the plant. Not as Rod, the maintenance guy in work boots and a company polo shirt, but as Rod Castellano, consultant, carrying an invoice book and charging more per hour than I used to make in a week. The production floor looked different when you walked through it as a vendor instead of an employee. Same equipment, same people, but now I was the expert they'd hired to solve problems they couldn't handle themselves. The Bay 7 coupling restoration took me exactly 23 minutes. I knew the system intimately because I designed every relay and programmed every response algorithm, something that would have taken their remaining maintenance team days of troubleshooting and probably several expensive service calls to equipment manufacturers. But I also did something else, something they should have asked me to do years ago. I documented everything, every system, every workaround, every critical component they'd taken for granted. Every piece of institutional knowledge that had been living in my head for 2 decades. I created a comprehensive maintenance manual that would let them operate without me, complete with diagnostic procedures, spare parts lists, and emergency contact information for specialized repair services. Then I handed them an invoice for 40 hours of emergency consulting and walked out. 2 weeks later, Titan Industries completed their acquisition of Apex Manufacturing. But the production delays had cost them $180,000 in contract penalties and pushed back the integration timeline by 3 months. Bryce Hamilton quietly transferred to another division. Jerry started treating the remaining senior staff with considerably more respect. And me? I had 4 more clients by the end of the month. Companies that had heard about the Apex situation through the industrial grapevine and realized they had their own Rod Castellanos keeping things running. Experienced guys who'd been there since the Carter administration, who knew where all the critical systems were buried, who could shut down operations just by retiring without proper knowledge transfer. I wasn't getting revenge. I was getting recognition, the kind that comes with a business license, a consulting rate that reflects market value, and clients who understand the difference between managing systems and actually understanding them. Some mornings I still reach for my adjustable wrench out of habit when I'm thinking through a complex problem. But now it's not because I'm worried about systems failing on my watch. It's because I'm building something new, something that can't be eliminated by a Harvard MBA who thinks experience is just another line item to optimize. They thought they were modernizing their operation. What they actually did was teach me my own worth in the marketplace, and that education was worth more than any severance package they could have offered. The basement workshop is busier now than it ever was, not with company emergencies that interrupted family dinners, but with projects for clients who value what I know. Companies that understand institutional knowledge isn't something you can download from the internet or outsource to the lowest bidder. And every time someone calls with a crisis that only I can solve, I remember what it felt like to see my photo taped to that reception desk like a security threat. Then I quote my current rates and watch them realize that expertise isn't disposable. It's just expensive when you wait until the last minute to appreciate it. Sometimes the most dangerous person in a company isn't the one making threats. It's the quiet guy who actually knows how everything works.